Bring the adventures of Thomas and his friends home with the Thomas Wooden Railway.
Time to go to the roundhouse.
The Thomas Wooden Railway brings your child's favorite Thomas stories magically to life and provides your little engineer with a rich world to discover and explore. Building with the Thomas Wooden Railway helps children develop physical, social, and cognitive skills, as well as a sense of pride and accomplishment. Plus, your child will learn important lessons about the value of friendship, fair play, and teamwork. Best of all, the Thomas and Friends Wooden Railway carries an unconditional lifetime guarantee, so Thomas will be your child's friend for life.
Now he has to go home.
Inspire your child to believe that little people, like little engines, can do big things. The Thomas Wooden Railway, available at specialty retailers everywhere.
One evening, Thomas brought his last train to the junction. Percy was glad to see him. "Are you on your way to the big station, Thomas?" "Yes, I am. Why?" "Because I'm going there too. I think something's up." Toby looked up at the sky. "Where?" "Not up there. Down here," laughed Thomas. "How can something be up when it's down?" Thomas was too excited to explain. "Bust my buffers! Look over there!" Mavis, Boko, Bill, Ben, Donald, Oliver, and Douglas paraded past. "Good evening, you three," whistled Donald. "Aren't we all a fine sight?" "Very splendid indeed," admired Toby. "Sorry we can't stop. Sir Topham Hatt wants us all together at the station." "What is this about?" asked Thomas. "Sir Topham Hatt has a plan," answered his driver. "Come on." So they followed the other engines to the big station at the end of the line. "Silence!" called Sir Topham Hatt. "I have an important letter to read from a little girl who is 5 years old." "Dear Thomas and all the engines, please can I meet you? My friends say they would like to meet you too. You could come to my house for tea, but my mommy says there aren't any railway tracks to my house. Can you come to the station instead? Thank you very much." "It seems," continued Sir Topham Hatt, "that there are many girls and boys who would like to meet you. Therefore, we are all going to the big city far away." "Hooray! Hooray!" the engines whistled. "Silence! Other engines will be working here while you're away, so please show them what to do." As Annie and Clarabelle were going to the big city too, Thomas and Oliver practiced with some other coaches. Thomas grew more and more excited. Too excited for his own good. "I'm glad I'm a splendid engine," he puffed. "Sir Topham Hatt thinks I'm really useful. I had a race with Bertie once. I whooshed through the tunnel and stopped an inch from the buffers." Then Thomas made his mistake. "Just like this," he boasted. No one was hurt, but Thomas's front was badly bent. They telephoned to Sir Topham Hatt. "I'll send up the workmen," he said. "But if they can't mend Thomas in time, we'll have to go to the big city without him." Poor Thomas. 8 o'clock next morning, the engines waited at the junction. Toby and Percy were each on a truck, and Duck had pushed them into place behind Edward. Gordon, James, and Henry were waiting to lead off. They whistled impatiently. Sir Topham Hatt looked at his watch. "I'll wait 1 more minute for Thomas, then we have to go." "Oh, thank goodness you're still here," panted Thomas. "I hope we're not late, as it's just after 8. The conductor blew his whistle and waved his flag. The engines cheered. "Look out, big city, here we come!" And the cavalcade puffed away. Later in the big city, all the engines were lined up in a splendid shed. The children were delighted to meet their friends. "I'm glad the little girl wrote to us," whispered Thomas to Percy. "Isn't it wonderful what happiness a letter can bring?" Skarloey had been to the works to be mended. He felt much better. Rusty the Diesel was helping him off his rail car. Skarloey hadn't met the little diesel before. "Rusty seems a kindly sort of engine," he thought to himself. "I help to mend the line and do odd jobs," explained Rusty. "I hear everyone is looking forward to seeing you again. Come on." Peter Sam was feeling depressed. He was still getting over his accident, but he wanted to start work again. Sir Topham Hatt wouldn't let him. "Another day's rest will do you good," he said. "Besides, I've got a surprise for you." "For me, sir? How nice, sir. What is it, sir?" "Wait and see." The surprise was Skarloey. "Oh," said Peter Sam, "I'm glad you've come home." They lit Skarloey's fire, and he sizzled happily. "I feel all excited," he said, "just like a young engine. Now tell me all the news." "I see you've met Rusty," said Peter Sam. "Yes, I like that diesel." "So do I," replied Peter Sam. "It's a pity Duncan doesn't." "Who is Duncan?" "He came as a spare engine after my accident," replied Peter Sam. "Is he useful?" "He keeps busy, and I'm sure he means well, but he's bouncy and rude. He sings and sways and swivels around. His drivers call it rock and roll." "I understand," said Skarloey gravely. His driver interrupted. "Duncan has done it again. He's stuck in a tunnel. Come on, old boy, we'll have to get him out." Skarloey was pleased. He wanted to run and looked forward to meeting Duncan. They found the caboose and some workmen and hurried up the line. "How nice and smooth the rails are," thought Skarloey. "They've mended all the old bumps. The little diesel has helped to do that. What a difference Rusty's made to the line." Quite soon, they found Duncan. He was stuck at the far end of the tunnel, and he was very cross. "I'm a plain, blunt engine. I speak as I find. Tunnels should be tunnels and not rabbit holes. This railway is no good at all." "Don't be silly," snapped his driver. "This tunnel is quite big enough for engines who don't rock and roll." It took a long time to clear away the rocks and set Duncan free again. At last, Skarloey was able to push Duncan and his coaches safely through. caboose was left on the siding, and the workmen stayed to make sure everything was safe. Duncan grumbled all the way home, but Skarloey paid no attention. Later, Sir Topham Hatt spoke severely to Duncan. Listen to me. There is nothing wrong with that tunnel. You stuck in it because you tried to do rock and roll. Tunnels are not dance floors, and you are not a pop star. Then Sir Topham Hatt gave his full attention to Duncan's funnel. If it happens again, he ended ominously, I shall find ways to cut you down to size. In other words, your career is on the line. Need I say more? Duncan thought Sir Topham Hatt had said quite enough, and he remained completely silent and still, for at least a whole evening. Skarloey, the little engine, loves all the sights and sounds along his line and knows them very well. One morning, soon after he returned from being mended, he was enjoying his journey more than ever before. Along the way, he met Rusty. You know, he said, if I couldn't see these familiar faces and places, I'd think I was on a different railway. You've done wonders with these rails. Rusty laughed. I'm glad you're pleased. Manager said, let's mend the track so well that he won't know where he is. And we did. And you didn't, if you take my meaning. Skarloey liked this hard-working diesel. There's still one bad bit, warned Rusty, just before the first station. An engine might come off there, particularly Duncan. He will rock and roll along the line. Look at him right now. I hope he doesn't hurt his passengers. What's that about me? I'm a plain engine, and I believe in plain speaking. Speak up! Rusty warned Duncan about the bad bit of rail. Huh! I know my way about. I don't need smelly diesels to tell me what to do. Rusty felt hurt. Duncan banged about the yard. Then he clattered crossly to the station. James was already there, waiting for him. You're late, he snapped. I know, said Duncan. It's that smelly diesel's fault. Rusty tries to teach me how to stay on the rails and then goes off leaving me to find my own coaches. You poor engine, sympathized James. I know all about diesels. One crept into our yard and ordered us about. I soon sent him packing. Duncan was filled with admiration. He didn't know that James was boastful and sometimes didn't tell the truth. Send Rusty packing! Send Rusty packing! Snorted Duncan. He climbed the hill furiously. Well done, boy, encouraged his driver. Keep it up. Soon they were near the first station. Duncan was pleased. Nothing's happened. Nothing's happened, silly old diesel. Clever me. And he rocked and rolled along the line. Steady, boy, checked his driver. But it was too late. Sleepers and ballast, I'm off. And he was. I warned him, said Rusty. But all he did was call me names. The little diesel refused to move. I'm ashamed of you, Rusty, said Skarloey. Think of the passengers. What are they going to do? Oh, I'd forgotten them. Yes, of course. We must help the passengers. And Rusty roared into life. Duncan stood sad and solitary. He couldn't rock and roll now. Oh dear, he thought. Everyone will know how silly I am. The passengers had to get out and help too. They weren't very pleased about that, but worked as hard as they could. They carefully levered Duncan back onto the line. After that, Duncan was extra careful all day. At last, evening came.
Rusty,
He whispered.
thank you for helping. I'm sorry I was rude to you.
That's all right, Duncan.
I wish all diesels were like you. Let's be friends.
Suits me, replied Rusty. We'll mend that bad bit of rail first thing tomorrow. Sir Handel is very proud of his big, sturdy wheels. They have broad tires and hold well to the rails, but they are unusual. One day, the other engines wouldn't stop teasing him. Look at his steamroller wheels, they joked. Be quiet, snorted Sir Handel. You're jealous. Don't worry, soothed Peter Sam. The engines all teased me about my special funnel until they learned how useful it is. Did you hear that? Huffed Sir Handel. My wheels are special, like Peter Sam's funnel. I can go faster than any of you. Skarloey had a plan to make Sir Handel see sense. With your grand wheels, Sir Handel, said Skarloey, you're just the engine to tackle George. Who's George? That steamroller over there, replied Skarloey. Listen. The steamroller was making rude remarks about the engines.
Railways are no good. Turn them into roads. Pull them up. Turn them into roads. Railways are no good. Turn them into roads. Pull them up. Turn them into roads.
Don't worry, said Sir Handel. Leave him to me. I'll send him packing. George will soon get a run for his money. Later that morning, George was at the level crossing.
Huh. You're Sir Handel, I suppose.
Sir Handel was standing no nonsense. And you, I suppose, are George? Yes, I've heard of you.
And I've heard of you. You swank around with your steamroller wheels, pretending you're as good as me.
Actually, I'm better. Goodbye. George chuffered on, fuming. Later that day, Sir Handel brought a special load down after the last train had gone. When he had reached the road, he saw George traveling home. Sir Handel tried to attract his attention. Beep, beep, beep. George took no notice. There was barely room to pass. Sir Handel was cross. Get out of my way, you great clumsy road hog.
Huh, I don't move for imitation steamrollers. You don't know the road. Get out of my way.
Then there was trouble. Ah! Cried Sir Handel. That was your fault.
No, it wasn't. It was yours.
Everyone was arguing about who was to blame. Hello, 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 said a policeman ominously. And what's going on here? This made everyone stop arguing. They set to work clearing up the mess instead. Next day, the workmen put up a fence between the road and the railway. Then they went away, taking George with them. Sir Handel thought he had made George go away. He talked of nothing but steamrollers. "Oh dear," whispered Skarloey. "He's worse than ever. I'm sorry my plan was no good." "Never mind," said Rusty. "We'll think of something else." But they had no need to do that. Some boys arrived instead. They pointed to the engine and cried, "Look, here's Sir Handel. He tried to race a steamroller, but the steamroller nearly beat him." Sir Handel never mentions steamrollers now. Oliver had been to the works to be mended. Some troublesome cars tricked him, and the Great Western engine fell into the turntable well. Now Oliver was as good as new, but he was still worried about cars. "I'd rather not use them," he puffed to himself. But the cars sang songs rude and loud. Scruffy, their leader, led the chorus.
Oliver's no use at all, thinks he's very clever, says that he can manage us, that's the best joke ever. When he orders us about with the greatest folly, we just push him down the well. Pop goes old Ollie.
Thomas, Duck, and Percy were shocked. "Be quiet," they ordered. But they couldn't be everywhere, and everywhere they weren't, the cars began again.
Oliver's no use at all, thinks he's very clever, says that he can manage us, that's the best joke ever.
At last, the engines gave up. "We're sorry, Oliver," they said. "It's really my fault," said Oliver sadly. "I shouldn't have fallen in the turntable well." Toad, the brake van, felt sorry for Oliver, too. Next morning, he spoke to Douglas.
"I'm worried, Mr. Douglas. This disrespect for engines, where's it going to end?"
"Who knows?" sighed Douglas.
"I've got a plan, Mr. Douglas. May I stay here today and help Mr. Oliver? We are both Great Western and must stand together."
"Certainly, Toad," replied Douglas and puffed away. Soon Toad was explaining his plan. "Goodness gracious, Toad, I don't think you should suggest such a thing to Oliver." But Oliver interrupted. "No, Duck, Toad's right. It's really my fault. I must put this trouble right."
"I meant no disrespect, you understand."
"Of course not, Toad. Anyway, driver says the same, and he's arranged it with the station master." "Very well, Oliver," conceded Duck, "but I must hurry. My passengers will be waiting. Good luck." "So long," smiled Oliver bravely, but he felt dreadfully nervous inside. Oliver marshaled the worst cars 2 by 2.
"That's the way, Mr. Oliver,"
whispered Toad.
"And if you leave that Scruffy till last, then you'll have him behind you, and you can bump him if he starts his nonsense." Hold back, whispered Scruffy, and pass the word to the others.
The silly cars giggled. But Oliver knew what to do. There was plenty of sand on the rails, and his wheels gripped splendidly. He gave a great heave.
"Oh!"
groaned Scruffy.
"I don't like this."
Go on, yelled Duck. Well done, boy, well done. Oh, wailed Scruffy.
I'm coming apart.
And he did. Then there was trouble.
Well, Oliver, so you don't know your own strength, is that it?
No, sir, said Oliver nervously. Sir Topham Hatt inspected Scruffy.
As I thought. Rotten wood, rusty frames. Maybe if we put you back together, you'll earn yourself a better name.
Nowadays, Oliver only takes the cars when the other engines are busy. But they're always quick to warn each other.
Take care with Mr. Oliver. If you play tricks on him, you'll never be the same car again.
Scruffy has learned his lesson and says nothing at all. Stepney's visit to Sir Topham Hatt's railway was coming to an end.
We shall miss you,
said Sir Topham Hatt. Then he turned his attention to all the other engines.
My railway is very busy, and I'm pleased with you, but you need help. A diesel is all that's available. Please do your best to avoid any disturbances.
What does that mean? Whispered Duck.
That means this diesel is difficult,
snapped James. And he was. The diesel surveyed the shed.
Not bad. I've seen worse. At least you're all clean.
The engines glared.
It's not your fault, but Sir Topham Hatt should scrap you and get engines like me. A fill of oil, a touch on the starter, and I'm off. No bother, no waiting. They have to fuss round you for hours before you're ready. The engines were furious.
Next morning, they held an indignation meeting round the turntable.
Disgraceful.
disgusting,
despicable. To say such things to us, cried Donald and Douglas. It's to teach him a lesson we'd be wanting. Now, how do we do it?
Their chance came sooner than expected. The diesel was purring comfortably. An inspector watched a fitter making final adjustments. The wind tugged at the inspector's hat. The diesel was ready.
Look at me, Duncan Stepney. Now I'll show you something.
He rolled proudly toward his coaches. Then it happened. Shaking and spluttering, the diesel stopped. Meanwhile, the inspector was looking for his hat. The diesel seethed with fury as Duck and Stepney pushed him back to the shed.
My hat, exclaimed the inspector. You sucked it through your air intake. Bother your hat. The heavy train's due out. You'll have to take it, Duck. Stepney, will you help, please?
Thank you, sir, cried Stepney. I'd like a good long run on my last day. The engines were soon ready.
Gordon will take over from halfway, so get the train to there. Good luck.
Don't worry, smiled Stepney. We'll get there, and be early, too. The cavalcade moved carefully over the rails and out to the open line. Now for a sprint, puffed Stepney. I'm ready when you are, replied Duck. Soon they were whizzing through Edward Station. And next they charged at Gordon's Hill beyond. They felt the drag of the heavy coaches here. It was hard work. At last, they were running smoothly along the line toward the big station.
Hello, you're early, said Gordon. That's one in the headlamp for old Diesel. James says he's sick as boiler sludge and sulking in the shed. Serves him right for saying we're out of date.
And Gordon chortled away. Next day, everyone came to say goodbye to Stepney.
Come back and see us soon,
Whistled the engines.
and you are always welcome on my Bluebell Railway, too.
Replied Stepney. Then he puffed away. And what about Diesel? He'd slipped out while no one was looking. But he left two things behind: a rather nasty smell and a battered bowler hat.
First saw Terence the tractor plowing in a field one day, and he said, "My oh my, you do look funny. Where are your wheels, are your wheels, are your wheels? However do you move along? You really do look funny." "Don't be so rude," said Terence the tractor. "I don't have rails like you because my caterpillar tracks are so much better. I can go anywhere, anywhere, anywhere. I don't need rails like you. One day I will prove it, show you how I do it. Then you will understand. There, you don't judge a book by its cover. Don't make your mind up too soon. Things aren't necessarily always what they appear to be. Don't judge a book by its cover. Don't make your mind up too soon. Never judge a book by its cover." Sure enough, one winter's day when the snow lay deep and hard, Thomas got stuck, he was in trouble. And who do you think came along and rescued him that day? The snow didn't matter to Terence the tractor. Now Thomas understands. There, you don't judge a book by its cover. You'll make your mind up too soon. Things aren't necessarily